school store, Kids Community Closet, Jean Steinblock Wife Widow Woman, Project Renewal, Healing Hearts Bank, Advocacy in Action, and that's just naming a few.
If you're a member of their community, you're going to see something that bothers you. And if it bothers you, you're going to want to do something about it. So this is what we've done, whether it be Planned Parenthood, whether it be children, whether it be politics.
Giving a darling little kid a winter coat and getting a big hug in return. I mean, that's a wonderful experience. We then look a little deeper and say, wait, what are the circumstances? What are the policies that are causing that kid's family to need a coat from us in the first place? Wouldn't it be better if we could also extend our efforts to minimum wage and fair education and food support for families that can't afford dinner tonight?
NCJW has been around long enough that it is so well respected in the community and in the nation that they can really get things done.
Anytime there's a political issue that affects women, children, or families, we're in the trenches doing it.
We work with people that don't agree with us on all our issues, but they know what they care about in one way or another, we care about too, and they will work with us. And I think that says a lot about our reputation in the community.
They have shown that they are capable of being effective in addressing community needs and that they are worthy of continued support.
It resonates with what makes them feel bigger in a world that is now making us feel smaller and less significant.
Really, we've created a legacy of organizations that change the landscape of the St. Louis not-for-profit community, including Scholarship Foundation, Legal Advocates for Abused Women, and Crown Center for Senior Living. These were all community service projects founded by NCJW, and they're still going strong today.
We are an organization that's not going anywhere. We've been around 125 years, and we're going to be around 125 years more.
It really doesn't matter what your interest or your talent is, because we can use it.
I'm inspired by community service.
Fighting for what's right.
I'm committed to help those in need.
To repair the world.
To ensure dignity for all.
To fight. To fight for social justice.
Women's rights.
To fight for the underserved.
Our voices together
make a difference. Make a difference in the world.
I'm committed to NCJW.
I'm committed.
I'm committed.
I'm committed to NCJW.
I'm committed to NCJW.
Okay, I think we're back. So, it's starting again. Hang on a minute. So much for technology. All right, I think I got it. So what I do want to share is that as an organization, while we may be called the National Council of Jewish Women, you don't have to be a woman, you don't have to be Jewish to be involved. You just have to support the issues that we support. And a lot of those issues are clearly in alignment with a lot of the folks that are on this call tonight, because it's all about helping those in need. It's about making sure that people have food and that they have health insurance and they have access to health insurance and that they are earning a minimum wage. We do a tremendous amount of work in Jeff City, as Tracy and Jill know. We spend a lot of time hanging out in their offices and testifying on legislation. We've had some successes, more often than not in Missouri, and I know Jill will share this. Our successes basically are stopping the bad things from moving forward. And we do a lot of that as well. We did get passed several years ago a bill that mandated that the human trafficking hotline be posted in truck stops and in clubs and hospitals and train stations and bus stations and places where we know victims will see it and where they can potentially access it and get help. You wouldn't think that would be a difficult thing to do, but in Missouri, it took 3 years to get that bill passed. There's another piece of legislation that Jill's going to talk about called the Victim Employment Safety and Security Act. It is designed to help victims of domestic and sexual violence take time off work without pay to get the help they need, to get orders of protection, to get counseling, to work with social workers, develop safety plans. That bill took 8 years. So we're in this for the long haul in terms of the issues that are important to us and to the people that we serve. And the people that we serve come from throughout the region. Our work is done all throughout the metropolitan area. Our biggest project is our back to school store. You saw some of that on the video. We serve annually over 2,000 children that we get ready for school. We provide a backpack full of school supplies. We provide clothes, winter coats, hats, gloves, underwear, socks, even little things like toothbrushes. You would be amazed at the number of children that come in to try on clothes and they have no underwear to even try those clothes on. And so it's our job to make sure that those kids have what they need to go back to school. Last year and this year, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we are not allowed to have 2,000 children all in one place with their families, with 650 volunteers to serve them. But what we are doing is we are doing a contactless delivery where we are taking backpacks full of school supplies and other things that children need to succeed in school. And we are delivering them to 70 plus social service agencies, churches, congregations, and other organizations to give to their clients. And so we are looking for volunteer drivers. We are looking for people to help the day of. It will be on Sunday, August 1st. And you can go to the NCJW website if you're interested in volunteering. It's ncjwstl.org. We have 4 other programs as well that we work on a regular basis. We have what's called our Healing Hearts Bank, which is a micro lending program. Originally started for victims of domestic and sexual violence. It has now branched out to women and families in need. These are $500 micro loans that we manage. And we have 22 different agencies that participate in making those loans available to their clients. Our kids' community closets are in 27 schools in the city and the county. And those are closets that we stock with school uniforms, with socks, with underwear, with sometimes it's belts. It's whatever it is the school tells us the children need in that school so that they never have to miss a day of school because they don't have what they need to be there. And that's where we really try to connect the dots, because we know that if we're ever going to make a difference in poverty levels, we need to keep kids in school. And we know that there are kids that don't go to school because they don't have shoes, they don't have winter coats, they don't have a clean uniform. We know young girls that miss a week of school every single month because they don't have period products. So we are putting period products in these backpacks to go out to these kids because we know they need them. And so we try to address those hands-on things that we can while taking the issues, the policy issues, to Jeff City. And that's where we do our advocacy work. We work on human trafficking. We have a whole program on Courts Matter. We know what happened with the last administration and the judges and who all got appointed and what we need to do to fix that and to change that. And so we work on educating folks about the importance of judicial nominations and the Fair Courts Plan in the state of Missouri. We have another program called Project Renewal, which helps women living in shelters, and we bring them into our resale shop. We give them a gift certificate to shop for free, and we provide workshops for them based on what the agencies tell us they need. So it might be job skills. It might be how to write a resume. It might be, how to answer the hard questions in an interview. You've been living in a shelter for a year. You haven't worked in a year, and someone says to you, "What have you done the past year?" You need to know how to answer those questions. And so we do that kind of a program. And then we have our Jean Stein Block Wife, Widow, Woman program, which is a program that's open to widows. And it is led by a licensed therapist and a volunteer. And that program is open to the public, and anyone that is interested in participating can sign up to participate. And those are the kinds of things we do. And then we do one-off projects and programs. And we are a membership organization, but you don't have to be a member to volunteer or participate in any of the programs. And we'd love to have any of you go with us to Jeff City. We're there pretty much once a week, sometimes twice a week. Sometimes we're just knocking on doors. Sometimes we're there to testify before or again on behalf of or against pieces of legislation. But we are out there and we are in the community, and our job is to make a difference and to make a positive difference for women, children, and families. I'm happy at this point to take any questions if there are any in the chat. Otherwise, I will turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Ellen. And from a personal perspective, I've been a member of NCJW now for several years, and I can't tell you how cool the women are. I interface.
Well, Maureen, I appreciate that. I will tell you, Jill and Tracy are also longtime members, yes. And I think I saw Ann Ross on the call. She's been a member for a long, long time. there's a lot of crossover in a lot of
Oh,
these
yeah.
organizations.
Yeah. So you'll be feeling right at home with other progressive women. But we are going to save questions till the end. If you can stick around, that would be great, Ellen.
Sure.
So now what we're going to do is go right into our main event. Again, thank you. Our main event with State Senator Jill Shoup. She is serving her 13th year as a member of the minority party in Missouri's legislature. In an environment where the so-called pro-life majority are also the party of guns everywhere, denial of health care, and including women's access to birth control is a tricky environment to navigate. Senator Shoup is among those senators who works hard to pass priorities, is willing to stand up to modify or defeat legislation that hurts her constituents or is bad for Missouri, and is proud to work among Democrats who are fighting hard against the Goliath that is the Missouri legislature. Senator Shoup has passed substantive legislation over the years by developing relationships and making the case for good public policy, from passage of whistleblower protections for all government employees to Nathan's Law, which limits the number of children in daycare to prevent death or injury from abuse and neglect, to the Justice for Survivors Act to ensure rape victims can access a forensic exam at any hospital in the state to help put perpetrators behind bars. This year, among other pieces of legislation, she passed VESA, the Victims Economic Security and Safety Act, that will help survivors of domestic violence and abuse get the support they need without losing their employment. She's excited about an effort toward ensuring that all kids in Missouri can read, and feels more optimistic than she has as a state legislator that this initiative is building relationships across the aisle while building a future for all of Missouri's children. She's grateful to be here and to work together with you on a shared courage, passion, and sense of purpose for a just and positive future. And I will turn you on to our friend Jill Shoup. Thank you.
Maureen, thank you so much to you, to Brian, and to Kathy, and to all of the Chesterfield Democratic Township members who are here tonight, to the ones who will be joining. And I want to give a shout out to Ellen for the great work of NCJW. I'm actually a lifetime member and really started with NCJW. I don't even know if it's been 2 decades yet, but a long time ago, working on the back to school store. And it is a great organization where not only do you do good work for people throughout the community, but you do it with other people who are going to have a good time and enjoy themselves while doing the work that needs to be done. So I'm really proud to be a lifetime member of NCJW. I also want to briefly say that Representative Tracy McCreary, who made her announcement today that she will be running for Missouri Senate, hopefully in my district, the 24th district. With the redrawing of the lines, we don't know exactly what things will look like, but Tracy has been such an amazing advocate in the House and has a long-term history of working for Senator Joan Bray, for Governor Bob Holden, and the Senate needs her. So I am delighted that she made this announcement today, and will be standing with her and beside her and doing everything I can to help her as she convinces the public, as if she already hasn't, but that she's the right person to represent us in Jefferson City. So I want to check, Maureen, and see. My screen tells me that the notes that I'm going to pull up are already in front of you, and that's not what I really want to have happen. They're just notes for me so that as I go through the bills for today, I have something to follow. Are you seeing those notes?
No, I just see your wonderful face. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, fabulous.
We're good.
Okay. All right. So I know that I gave a title to this talk that I thought would elicit a response, and Brian has made it clear that it has. And the title, for those of you who may not recall, is Rush Limbaugh is Alive and Well in Missouri, the Show Me State. And while that may sound a bit irreverent, I apologize for that, but there's a reason that I say it. And I work in Jefferson City, and in a moment I'll give you the lay of the land, the numbers of us in Jefferson City who are Democrats and who are Republicans. And what I didn't like about Rush Limbaugh, and the reason I decided to use him in the title, was that he was willing always to distort the truth. His goal was to enrage and inflame and distort rather than find the truth and seek it out. Because frankly, what kind of conservative radio show host would he have been if he didn't work to distort and inflame and enrage and get people all riled up? So I think it's really important that everyone out there, whether you're on my side or a different side, remember that he was not a truth teller. He was an entertainer. And frankly, when his guy, former President Donald Trump, became president, the statements he made seemed even less egregious than those that were made by the leader of the free world. And I've seen these distortions, this acceptance of immorality in the ways of comporting oneself in Jefferson City, of acceptance of less than civil discourse and a lack of recognition or apology for that behavior as an ongoing piece of both Rush Limbaugh's legacy and of President Donald Trump's legacy. And it plays out in various ways. And there weren't as many of you who came to Jefferson City this year because of COVID to testify in person. But for those who did, there are people on committees who will do everything they can to undermine you in the most uncivil and relentless of ways, to frankly attack people who have traveled throughout our state to come and present their truth and tell us why they believe a certain bill should or should not pass. And not only does this play out in hearings, I've seen it play out on the Senate floor and in our policy. And it is frightening to me. And I want to get back to a place where not only can we be civil with each other in terms of how we behave, but in terms of how we try to listen and learn and pass policies that are going to make a positive difference in people's lives. So I want to give you a quick run of the numbers in the legislature for those who are not familiar. As you know, 34 senators are elected every 2 years. We have another election with half of the people being up for re-election or election. 24 of those 34 senators are Republicans, 10 are Democrats. In the House, there are 163 members elected every 2 years. 113 of them are Republicans, 49 are Democrats. So our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, many of them with very extreme views, have a supermajority in the House and in the Senate, and they're represented by a Republican in the governor's mansion and for most of the statewide offices. This past session, and it was an entire session where for the most part until the very end, when I was double vaccinated and all of my staff was too, I wore a mask every day, all day to work. So did most of my Democratic colleagues and an occasional Republican. But for the most part, when people were unvaccinated, there were many people who were unmasked. And it was a challenging time from that perspective to be there, not just for those of us who were there in person, but for those of us who also went home every weekend to be with our families, never knowing what we might be bringing with us. During this full legislative session, 69 bills passed, which includes the budget bills. So without those budget or appropriations bills, only 51 bills passed this legislative session. Now, in some ways, it's good that there were so few, but in some ways, many of us know that there were several that really needed to pass and did not. So I want to talk about what I think of as the big four. And there are so many other important bills, and I will get into some additional ones in a moment. But I'm calling the big four two things that did pass that I think of are bad, and two things that didn't, that needed to. As you know, back in August, we voted for the expansion of Medicaid in the state of Missouri so that 275,000 additional Missourians could have access to health care that they cannot afford on their, relatively meager salaries. Medicaid expansion passed across the state and by 6 points in the state of Missouri, but the legislature chose not to fund it. You can't have a health care program for low-income people if you don't fund it. And just as a reminder, our dollars that we sent for Medicaid, that we put aside for this expansion of Medicaid, would draw down federal dollars, our taxpayer dollars, as they're doing in almost every other state. to the tune of billions of dollars. Billions of dollars would have come into our state in terms of healthcare, creating an additional 16,000 jobs, allowing 275,000 more people to access healthcare. And we would have paid less than 10% of the cost of that expansion of access to healthcare for people in our state. I say less than 10%. Eventually it will become 10%. But under the Biden administration, there's an additional bonus for those states who now step up and do what we need to do to provide healthcare for the people in our state who need and can't afford it. That was one terrible failure of this year's Missouri legislature. The second, in my view, was the non-passage thus far of the federal reimbursement allowance. This is known as the FRA. Now, it's not the same as Medicaid expansion, but it's a close cousin. So the federal reimbursement allowance is a fee assessed upon the providers, our hospitals and throughout the state, our healthcare providers. It's in essence, a fee or a tax on them. These dollars are pooled together to demonstrate to the federal government that we have investment here in our current Medicaid program. And let me remind you about who is eligible currently for Medicaid in the state of Missouri. In the state of Missouri, if you make more than 19% of the federal poverty level, you make too much money to currently be eligible to receive health care in Missouri. Let's talk about what that means. And I'm going to talk to you about it in terms of a family of 4. And I'm going to round numbers a little to make it easy. I'm going to call 19% of the federal poverty level 20%. So if you make 20% of the federal poverty level, if you make above that, you make too much to be able to get health care in Missouri. What does that mean in terms of numbers? Well, for a family of 4, 100% of the federal poverty level is a little bit over $25,000 a year. 20% of that, or 1/5 of that, would be about $5,000 a year. If you're a family of 4 who is making over $5,000 a year, you make too much money in the state of Missouri to access health care. By not passing the federal reimbursement allowance, which we pass year after year after year to ensure that we can draw down federal funding to help us pay for Medicaid, the current program, we are going to be out of money in November or December of this year. So what's going to happen, most likely, is that the legislature will be called into a special session by the governor. The governor has said he won't call us in until a plan is in place. The reason that this didn't happen this year during session is because one of my colleagues put an amendment on the federal reimbursement allowance bill, which is always a standalone bill. His amendment says we will not use Medicaid to pay for contraception coverage for women because he sees all contraception as abortifacients. So no pill, no IUD for women, because that would perhaps interrupt a pregnancy, even though, and we can get into the specifics, but by the definition of what a pregnancy is, that simply isn't the case. The reason it shut down this bill going forward is not because of his ridiculous inability or desire to stop women from having access to birth control to make reasoned decisions about when they have a family, but because that is not in compliance with federal law. So CMS, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare, says the only way we will help pay for Medicaid in your state is if you allow women access to birth control. So those are 2 of the big things that did not pass that needed to pass this year. 2 things that did pass that concern me greatly are through House Bill 349, vouchers in the state of Missouri for our students. And I want to talk about why this voucher bill is really the worst of the worst kind of voucher bill you can imagine from my perspective. So we're talking about education, and we're talking about kids having access to money so that they can utilize that money to go to a private or parochial school? Well, first of all, the way it's set up is an end run around the Constitution, and we can get into that if you'd like. But also, this voucher bill would provide for students about right around $6,500. I think it's actually $6,700 a year. Most low-income kids who are in schools that are not fully accredited cannot afford either the additional money to go to a private school or the transportation to get them there, and those things are not covered. What I believe will happen with this voucher bill is that it will end up in the hands of kids, families who already go to private or parochial schools. They will access those dollars because they're already going there, and it will give them a subsidy towards their tuition payments. It's a $50 million program that will gradually ease its way up to $75 million. These are $50 to $75 million that are redirected from our general revenue. $50 to $75 million that could go to actually help improve our schools, which an audit just found are funded less than by the state than any other schools in the nation. The donors who provide the funding for this get tax credits, and they can fund up to 50% of their tax liability. But here's the catcher. We all know that tax credits can be used for good or for bad. These tax credits are reimbursed at the 100% level, which means if you're somebody who has money and you invest it, you get 100% of what you've invested back. In other words, you are paying nothing. What you're doing is redirecting general revenue to go provide some kind of scholarship, mostly for kids who won't need it, because the kids who are in underperforming districts and who are perhaps living in poverty won't be able to afford what they need to go to those schools. So that's our educational savings account, our voucher bill, House Bill 349. And another one that made my big four list was the Second Amendment Preservation Act, House Bill 85. What the Second Amendment Preservation Act in Missouri says is that Missouri will not enforce federal gun laws if they're more restrictive than Missouri's gun laws. And frankly, of course they are. Missouri has, when we open our paper every day, if you listen to the news at night, there is another shooting and another and another. So many people are dying by gun violence in our state, but the legislature on the Republican side is worried that access to guns anywhere and by everyone is just not happening enough. So the Second Amendment Preservation Act, we tried to add an amendment that said, if you are a convicted abuser, a convicted domestic violence perpetrator, you should not be able to have a gun. And that amendment failed. So Rush Limbaugh and his ilk are alive and well and living in the show me state. I shouldn't say living. His ideas, his opinions are alive and well here in the state of Missouri. So I wanted to quickly list some other bills that I did not and cannot support and run through them briefly, run through some bills that I did support, give you a little brief on some of my bills that passed this year and how that happens, and then talk about what I'm hopeful about for the future. Maureen, how much time do I have? How quickly should I rush through these? Or Brian?
Myself there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we'd like to open up for questions, I think by 8 o'clock, because generally we have a lot of people who ask questions. Our audience is very immersed.
All right, so I'm kind of watching the clock. I have 7:40, but feel welcome to interrupt me. As you can tell, I'm used to filibustering in the Senate, so I can go not even put a period at the end of my sentence and haven't realized
okay.
We'll
so, watch the clock.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, House Bill 345, which further limits people's access to the courts. It tips the scales to, quite frankly, benefit insurance companies. House Bill 429, and again, these are bills that I did not support and will not support, but it limits parents' access to counsel during the termination of parental rights adoptions. This could be a big problem for families down the road, and I think it is wrong-headed and did not support it for that reason. House Bill 574 restricts ground inspections of CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, by certain law enforcement, and limits testimony in criminal animal abuse proceedings. House Bill 661, if you're somebody who cares deeply about the environment, and we all should be if we aren't already, this exempts St. Charles, Franklin, and Jefferson counties from the motor vehicle emissions inspection program. So the people from these counties said, our counties are all in compliance. We are not polluting more than we're supposed to under federal law. So we want to get out of that program and not have to test our car for emissions. Well, if they could only keep their pollution in their counties, then maybe I'd be okay with it. It doesn't work that way in the world. And so not only are we jeopardizing our air quality, but we're potentially jeopardizing federal infrastructure funding, and a big concern to me. In House Bill 271, we, and when I say we, my Republican colleagues, for the most part, passed a vaccine passport bill that says no county, no city, no town or village that gets public funding, which is pretty much all of them, can require documentation for a person to have the vaccine if they're getting on transit or for any other kind of a public accommodation. So if you want to know somewhere you're going is safe, that everybody has been vaccinated or is wearing a mask, we're not going to be allowed to do that. We also have a COVID liability shield that was passed that makes it more difficult for people to sue in cases of medical liability, product liability, or exposure claims at businesses and churches. Now look, a lot of our businesses, our places of worship, many, I would say the vast majority, did the very best they could under challenging circumstances to make sure that people came in and were safe. But there are some that were egregious and brought in people who were sick to continue to work. Those people should be able to be sued, and now this law makes it even more difficult. We had a couple of big utility bills that are on my watch list, and I want to talk briefly about Senate Bill 44, which is the Monopoly Water Utilities Bill. This bill allows an additional profit by imposing now a statewide customer surcharge. In the past, it's just mostly us, St. Louis County, that has paid this on the maintenance of the company's assets. And the surcharge is charged outside of a full rate review by the Public Service Commission. So I worked hard on this bill to put some consumer protections in, but it's still a bill I could not support, and I'm very concerned about it. I have made sure through my legislation that through my amendments that St. Louis County residents can't be charged for the current ISRIS that we're already paying in addition to a new one. So we won't be double charged by the water company, by Missouri American Water. And since Missouri American Water is working to shift all of its risk to the customers, I added language to allow for the Public Service Commission to account for the reduced liability in their general rate proceedings. So when the Public Service Commission opens the books and looks at everything the water company is earning, it can consider the fact that the risk is on us as customers. We are spending the money that the water company is no longer having to spend on its own. And I added an amendment that prevents them from preempting a court case that is going on with regard to how much they're charging. And by deleting the net operating loss carry forwards associated with eligible infrastructure systems projects from the bill. If this all sounds complex, let me tell you it is. Tracy McCreary, Representative McCreary, and I work very carefully and very long hours on utility legislation. It's very complex. And I will tell you, if you ever get a chance to stand up for the Office of Public Counsel, a very small office in Jefferson City, they are the office who are dedicated to consumer protection. That is their role. You will hear them testifying at all of these rate cases where our monopoly utilities go to make the case for why they should make more money for themselves and their shareholders. Also on my watch list, although it's a bill that I did end up supporting, it involved renewable natural gas and electric securitization. So natural gas companies under this bill are allowed to recover their costs from natural gas obtained from CAFO, that was confined animal feeding operation, methane emissions. I added protections, including a sunset on this bill so that we can see how effective it's been. I said recovery can't be permitted until projects are actually operating and producing renewable natural gas for customer use. We've heard of horror stories in other states where taxpayers, ratepayers have put in a lot of money and then the project stopped in midstream and the ratepayers were out that money that they had been forced to invest. Secured, and we've limited the number of times a gas company can ask for recovery outside of a full rate case to the Public Service Commission to 1 time per year, which is more than I'd like, but less than what they had planned. And securitization, which allows the electric companies to retire assets like mostly coal plants early and replace them with more environmentally friendly producing assets. I support that idea. I also support consumer protections. So I put in language to make sure the Public Service Commission has the full authority to review the prudency of new investments and to prevent double recovery, money earned off of the old and the replacement assets by the electric utilities. So that's hard work that we've done. And certainly Representative McCreary is a champion for this kind of work too. And so I'm excited that when I'm gone, that she will be there to carry her depth and breadth of knowledge over to the Senate. We also had a bill that was passed, Senate Bill 26, that provided police officers a Bill of Rights. And it was supposed to allow parole eligibility for certain drug offenders who had served a minimum of 10 years. And that was actually left off the bill due to a drafting error at the end, which is a shame because what the Bill of Rights does is gives protections to bad cops. Look, we have lots of good cops and they don't need these kinds of protections. These protections are designed to help bad cops. All right, I'm going to move on to bills that I think that we are pretty happy about that passed. This Thursday morning, the governor will be here in St. Louis signing his PDMP bill, the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, which will now be statewide. We've been trying to pass this for years and it finally got done this year. We've passed a Wayfair bill, so there will be taxes on those internet purchases here like there are in many other states throughout the country. So revenue will be coming into our municipalities and our counties. And one of my favorite pieces of this bill is that there will be an earned income tax credit for middle-class families. We've passed a small gas tax increase. As you know, we're now 49th or 50th in the nation in terms of what we pay at the pump, 17 cents per gallon for gas. We need to pay more to make sure our roads and our bridges are structurally sound and that nobody gets hurt on them. The only way to do that is to pay for it. And the gas tax increase will not need to go to the voters because it only increases it by 2.5 cents per year for a couple of years at a time and then continues up to a total, I think, of 7.5 cents increase. Still among the lowest in the country. We passed a bill that bans chokeholds, that tracks and reports incidents of police violence, that keeps bad cops from changing jobs once they're fired or resign from their current job because it allows reporting to move from precinct to precinct. I can't believe we had to do this, but it outlaws sex on the job with anyone who is in custody. So police officers are no longer allowed to engage in sexual activities with anyone that they have arrested or that is in custody. We have a bill that, and I know that Representative McCreary worked very hard on this bill too, that allows for real menstrual products for women who are incarcerated. Otherwise, they get sick. You know, people need to have the sanitary hygiene products, the period products they need. We now allow for HIV drugs to be provided without a prescription. So a pharmacist can provide those drugs to make sure that HIV positive people are keeping that virus under control. We are now able to crack down on abuses that we've learned about at faith-based schools in Missouri. So up till now, faith-based schools were out of our purview. We let them do their own thing. When we realized what's happening there, we finally were able to get a bill passed to say, we will not stand by while children and young people are being hurt. My bills, Ellen talked to you about VESA, the Victims Economic Safety and Security Act. passed as part of House Bill 432. And for those of you who don't know, almost all, but certainly most of my bills get passed. They're bills that I file, but they're passed as amendments onto other bills that are moving through the process. So rather than have my name on them, they have the name of the sponsor of the underlying bill, who I have convinced to allow my bill to be a part of. And that's how they pass through the process. It doesn't matter if they don't have my name on them. What matters is that good public policy is being put into place. So the Victims Economic Safety and Security Act that allows women to keep it's mostly women, to keep their jobs, even if they need to take up to 2 weeks worth of leave, unpaid leave, in order to pull themselves together, whether they need to get orders of protection and go to court, whether they need to get counseling, as Ellen mentioned, whether they need to take care of themselves and their families and find a place to move, to do what they need to do. We don't want these survivors to become victims, because in addition to this, they lose their ability to have to be financially sound through their employment. So it's a great bill. The amount of time you have off is based on the size of your employer. As Ellen mentioned, the NCJW is working on it for 8 years. I think I took it up a couple of years ago as my bill. Before that, it was handled by someone else. And I'm delighted that this is the year we finally got this done to make those victims truly become survivors. We put into place, after bills were already filed, I heard from people in the county whose property tax bill had been sent in on time, but for some reason had not been received on time by St. Louis County. So that was largely due to post office problems, because people weren't working during COVID. The post office stood up and said, yes, some of this could be our problem. So we gave the ability to St. Louis County to fix the problem and reimburse people for late fees for the property taxes for late fees and interest that they had been charged on property taxes. If you have a question about that, it's limited to about an 8-day period, but I'm happy to answer that. I also was able to pass an important farm to food bank program that allows places like Operation Food Search to go to farms, to pay a stipend to farmers to glean the harvest from the edge of their fields and to bring back fresh produce to be able to distribute to food banks around our area. And this can not only happen in our area, it's throughout the state, but we're so excited about this. We know how important fresh fruits and vegetables are to people who are hungry. We need them to get good nutrition. And this year, dollars were put in the budget for the bill that I passed last year, the Justice for Survivors bill, to make sure that no matter where a person is raped or sexually assaulted throughout the state, she or he can go into a hospital and get an exam done. And if they don't have the appropriate staff to do those exams, they, through this Justice for Survivors bill, will be allowed to access telehealth care, so that someone who knows, who is stationed at this program base, can walk them through the forensic process, so that we make sure that those survivors are well taken care of. The evidence is collected. They aren't sent to another hospital and just end up going home and washing away the evidence. And this will help us start to catch those perpetrators. Right now, out of 100 perpetrators, only 5 are caught. We believe this change in the law and this new system here in Missouri will increase those numbers. The other thing that we missed, in addition to Medicaid and the federal reimbursement allowance, was we really wanted, through no fault of their own, people received unemployment benefits from the Department of Labor. And people checked in, they were told that they qualified for these benefits. These benefits were sent to them, sometimes up to $8,000. These families during COVID who weren't working spent this money to help feed and shelter and clothe their families, to make sure the electricity was turned on and the bills were paid. Then the Department of Labor came back and said, there was an error and you're not eligible for those funds and you're going to have to pay them back. Well, if you're a family who is struggling through the pandemic, like so many were, and got these dollars to take care of your family, they're largely spent. Can you imagine having limited funds, maybe not even being back at work yet, and having to repay those dollars? So we thought we were going to be able to get this done. It didn't end up getting through the process, and I'm sad for that. Okay, I think I have about 4 more minutes. I'm going to talk briefly to tell you that next year we can be sure that voter suppression bills are going to be on the table, and we're going to be fighting those. So we're going to need all of your help. The reason I have hopes going forward is, first of all, the freshman class of senators this year, there are 5 out of the 10 of us, have been amazing. They have come into the Senate, they have stepped up, they have worked hard, they have been active on the floor, they have passed legislation, and they have stood with us to make our group of 10 really strong. The second reason is because the Senate women, all 11 of us, the most number of women we've had in the Senate in Missouri's 200-year history, have joined together, and we are working together to promote literacy throughout the state of Missouri. We're compiling a book, but more importantly, we're working on public policy to help make sure that every child who needs help to be able to read by 3rd grade, at 3rd grade reading level, gets the help he or she needs. We know that up to 3rd grade, you learn to read. After 3rd grade, you're reading to learn. We want every child to have that opportunity and advantage. And working together on this project has made us closer. We may have our disagreements, our vehement disagreements on the Senate floor, but we also know that we can go and talk to each other and work through things in a way I've never seen before. I'm so proud to work alongside these women, even though, as I said, sometimes I disagree with them in really important ways, but knowing that a door is open so that we can talk through things makes all the difference in the world. So those are a couple of the things I'm hopeful about. I think I'm just about at my time limit. And so now I'd like to kind of open things for all of you to be able to ask questions, to talk about whatever it is that you'd like to know. And if I can inform you, I will be happy to try.
Well, gosh, Jill, something that I've realized is that as much as we get mired in the headline stories of all the bad stuff that's going on, my goodness, I didn't know a lot of the good stuff. And so this has been really helpful. And yeah, we have a long way to go, but you Democrats here, you are doing as much as you possibly can. And we're grateful for that. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. And we are on in both chambers. And I'm really proud and delighted to be there. Sometimes when we're there till 3 and 4 and 6 in the morning, it gets really hard and it gets frustrating. But we keep coming back to this greater good that all of us are trying to serve, and that all of you behind the scenes and in your various ways are behind us. Knowing that you're behind us, knowing that you're with us, knowing that you're out pounding the pavement and doing the good work too, means more than you can imagine.
Well, what I'd like to do is I'll take the first question, and it's actually one that I had been thinking about to talk to you about, and so it's a really good segue. I was going to start with, what's the future of Missouri 2 here with Ann Wagner. The person here is telling you, of course, how brilliant you are, and we know that, would like to have you run for U.S. Senate. I'd be happy to have you run again, and you don't have to commit here unless you'd like to make an announcement. Just think seriously of giving it another run for at least the seat of Missouri 2. So we'll ask you, she's asking, won't you run for U.S. Senate? And I'm saying, could you please think about at least running for Missouri 2 again?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. A lot of you I haven't seen since that last November election, and I've been through a legislative session, and we've all been through so many things together. I was surprised by the outcome of that race. I think a lot of us were, and certainly a lot of the pollsters were. And, in retrospect, I think that I would have done some things differently, but I actually believe I had such a good and strong team. And I think, COVID interfered with my favorite part of running, which is getting out and talking to people in person and listening to people and hearing what they have to say. So I think this next time around will be different. I am not running again. I want to make that really clear. That was a difficult campaign. And what I see with these new freshman senators and with other people who are running for House and with people who are running for Senate and with so many young people who got involved with my race and others is that there are good, strong candidates out there, or potential candidates or eventual candidates. And my job, I believe, now and after I'm done serving in another year, will be to work to help other people get elected and to work on a long-term plan for the state of Missouri. This didn't happen overnight. When I joined the House in 2009, there were 74 Democrats. Now there are 49. We need to invest in our own future, and we can't reinvest every 2 years and expect to have a better outcome. So I'm not the only one who's thinking this way. There are many of us. We're going to need all the support we can get. And we're working on putting plans together and engaging organizations like the Chesterfield Democratic Township to be helpful along the way. So I'm here I believe that at least for Congressional District 2, that we will see some good candidates stepping up. I've already heard from some. We'll see how things play out, but I'm excited about what the future will bring. And I do not have anyone's permission yet to talk about what their plans are, what they're thinking, but I don't get excited about these things easily. I know what a challenge it is, having done it myself, and we know the lines will be a little bit different, or maybe more than a little bit going forward. But I am delighted to see the caliber of candidate who is stepping up.
Well, and in fact, hearing that gives us hope, because the ability that you have and those like you who will be joining in this effort, the mentorship is critical, because people will be able to hit the ground running and informed much better earlier. And so I applaud that your heart is there and your skill set is there to help them in their quest to win their seats. So that's great.
Thank you.
Do we have, we don't have questions in the chat, but we can open this up since it's a small group. Do we have some of you that would wish to? Brian, I'm not sure how you do that. Do you unmute everybody, or?
Everybody has the ability to unmute, but let's recognize them. If you just raise your hand and then reactions, you can, in the reactions portion, you can raise your hand.
Because I can only see a few people in my screen.
I see that Mary Gross does have a question.
Great.
And I would like to respond to it. And her question is about voter suppression bills coming up next session. Right. And I touched on that very, very briefly. And yes, I think it is going to be a major focus in Missouri next session, as it is in many states throughout the country right now. I think that when the Republicans have these kinds of supermajorities, they are going to do everything they can to hold on to them. And that means suppressing voters who are more Democratic. So making it, making access to the polls harder, things like early voting are going to be, everything's going to be made more difficult for people. And the people among us who are the most challenged are going to have the most challenges put in front of them. So yes, they will be coming before us. I strongly believe that. And we saw bills filed this year, but they didn't move very far because there were other things, I suppose, that they were trying to move instead. Now, you know full well that the Democrats will be there to do everything we can to either stop those bills or mitigate them to the best degree that we can. So a lot of times when you hear about our filibusters, just so you know, those filibusters are designed to give us time to, so you may not hear from some of us at all on the floor. It's because we're off negotiating with the bill sponsor or with somebody else who is handling that negotiation time. We will be working. We know how important it is. Your fundamental right to vote deserves as much protection as the Second Amendment, for crying out loud. And voting doesn't kill people, guns do. So we will be continuing to work hard to ensure as many opportunities for people to vote early, and to vote in ways that are comfortable for them and make it easier rather than harder.
I happened to think of something that I meant to ask, and I don't know if it's on anybody's radar, and I hope I'm wrong, regarding the funding Medicaid and the birth control problem and the Planned Parenthood problem. We know that Biden will stick up for us, that if they try to defund, that we'll lose our Medicaid money, the federal money, if they try to defund Planned Parenthood again or try to make it so that people can't go there. But I've heard that maybe what they'll just do is self-fund. The state will self-fund Medicaid, and then they can do whatever they want. Now, that could be a nasty rumor. And where the heck are they going to get the money to self-fund Medicaid? That's a question with that. I don't know the numbers. Maybe you could comment on that.
Oh my gosh.
You look surprised. That kind of makes me feel good.
Yeah, Medicaid is billions of dollars. And that's why we really depend upon the federal government for their matching funds. When I say matching, currently for that 19% that I talked about earlier, the federal poverty level for all of those folks who access Medicaid, we put in 45% of the dollar, or 35% of the dollars, got to do my math right, and the federal government puts in 65% of the dollars. Under the expansion of Medicaid, we will put in 10% of those new dollars, and the federal government will put in 90%. The state cannot possibly afford to fund these programs. We draw down literally billions of dollars from the federal government for current Medicaid program. So let's talk about the federal reimbursement allowance. I mean, I know everybody's heard about Medicaid expansion, and you know where we are with that, and that's in court. And that will go to court, and the court will decide if the passage of Medicaid expansion also meant that the state needed to fund it. And, you know, let's just hope to God that the case we make is strong enough to say yes. But the federal reimbursement allowance, there are some tricky things about this. First of all, after session, when a bill is passed in special session, it takes 90 days after its passage for it to go into effect, unless the bill is passed with an emergency clause. Now, there are going to be some people on the Republican side who don't want to vote for the federal reimbursement allowance, especially if that anti-contraception language is removed. So in order to pass something with an emergency clause, it needs it needs a vote of 2/3 of the people in the chamber. I'm questioning myself because I'm even thinking, is it 3/4? But no, it must be 2/3. It's hard to get to that number to pass something with an emergency clause so it goes into effect immediately. Here's the problem. By the end of June, so September 30th, the end of September is the date that our current Medicaid arrangement expires. Currently, our hospitals and our providers are allowed to be assessed a fee of 6%. Once that agreement that they're allowed to be assessed a fee of 6% expires, CMS, the Federal Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, can say, you can no longer assess them a 6% fee. We are only allowing other states to assess them at 3.5%. You can only assess them at 3.5%. If we wait till beyond June and we allow that Medicaid contract to expire and don't get a bill passed with an emergency clause, there is no guarantee that we will be able to provide 6% of provider funds and that we will be reimbursed at the billions of dollars rate that we are now. All of this seems to me, I know that next week is when I've read that House and Senate leadership are meeting with Governor Parson to go through all this. But this is a big problem from where I'm sitting. And I called several lobbyists who work with hospitals who work on these pieces of legislation to make sure I had my story straight, to make sure I'm reporting this correctly. And I believe that I am, and I'm very concerned. Now, there are a lot of, if this happens, then this. So I don't know how it will all pan out, but I want to tell you it's a big damn deal. And so appeasing the senator who put on the birth control or the anti-birth control language is part of the negotiation that will either allow us to go back into session between now and the end of June or not. Many, many things up in the air, many reasons that as a legislator, I'm concerned, but I also know, I will tell you this, I learned this in the House way back when. The things that literally kept me up at night so that I could not sleep worrying about what would happen the next day were no big deal anymore the next day. So I hope it will work itself out. I hope we'll get this figured out. I think that everyone in the state of Missouri understands the gravity of this situation, and we will see what happens. Just so you know, the Democrats were told that the Republicans would bring a clean federal reimbursement allowance, a clean FRA bill to the floor, and they did not. They brought one that got an amendment added to it, and that's what threw everything into this situation we're in now with something that may not even be in compliance with federal law. So, long answer to a short question.
Oh my.
That's why I'm so darn good on the Senate floor. No, I'm
yeah. Well, you know your stuff, that's for sure. I wanted to remind everybody that if you had anything for Ellen Elper and NCJW, that feel free that you can raise your hand or whatever you'd like to do to ask her a question as well. So I can't see everybody to see if they're raising their hand, or can someone, oh, okay. Ellen just asked, this is a great idea, a great question. What happens to current people on Medicaid if this goes south?
Well, that's a great question. I think that what will happen is that as long as we have money, it will be provided. But then once we run out and once hospitals and doctors don't continue getting reimbursed, they're not under any obligation, except unless somebody's life is in danger. They're not under any obligation to provide those additional services, particularly preventative services, which are so important to make sure people don't get really sick. So this gets less attention, I think, than, well, this deserves as much attention as any other terrible situation that we're in, like not expanding Medicaid, even though the people told us to.
Right. I'm wondering how we can get it back in front of people so that they know, and I'm not sure, I know the Post-Dispatch is doing some things. Tony Messenger has been great. I don't know if he's written on this, but what the heck, people in the rural areas need to hear that, hey, guess what? There's a lot of you all on Medicaid, you're going to lose it.
Right. And, it's interesting to me too, when you say that, a lot of people have this mistaken impression that Medicaid is for poor Black people who live in the city.
Yep.
And the reality is there are many, many, many more white people on Medicaid and a disproportionate amount of rural folks. So this will have ramifications throughout the state, including the additional closing of rural hospitals and rural providers. I mean, this is a real threat. And think about, for a moment, about the people on Medicaid who live in nursing homes. Mm-hmm. So what happens to them? They've spent down their money so that they could get into a nursing home that Medicaid is covering. And now what? We're going to throw them out in the streets? This is outrageous. This is a problem created by the Republicans in the legislature, and they need to get it fixed.
Wow. Doesn't sound hopeful. And I don't know what we can do in the short term to make people aware that, this is going to affect you. Yeah. So.
I had a question that was sent to me about the best way to advocate. And, do things like parades and marches make a difference? Does coming and testifying make a difference? Does calling legislators or being there in person matter? I think that it's interesting to me when people march on the Capitol, when they come to the Capitol and either knock on our doors or have a rally outside, it makes a difference to the people who are on your side. I don't know that it often makes a difference to the people who are not. I think that what I try to tell people is things that NCJW does, that other organizations, that people like many of you have done, coming to Jefferson City and testifying on bills is really helpful. This was a tough year. I did not encourage anybody that was fearful about coming to Jefferson City and testifying in committee to do it because of the COVID uncertainty. And we got special permission this year to allow you to send in written testimony that actually counted as if it was live testimony. It doesn't usually count that way. We don't usually hear as legislators from other committees who testified by sending something in writing. It never gets to us. So this year it changed, and you were allowed to send things in writing, and we would get a report that said, you know, Ann Ross sent in testimony, or Ellen Alper from NCJW sent in testimony, and in support or in opposition. So we would get that on our reports. My belief is that first, you ask the legislator how they best receive your information. So if you have that luxury to talk to a legislator and say, would you like a one-page sheet on this? Would you like me to call you? Is that the best way to reach you? What's a good time? Should I talk to your staff? What are some ways we can reach out to you? I think that that's helpful. And I also will say this. I also think it's good to reach out anytime you can to thank someone for something they've done.
Yeah.
You know, you've heard about these bills that pass. My bills don't pass without Republican support. It's impossible. We don't have enough Democrats in the House or the Senate to pass a bill, even if every one of them voted for it. So everything a Democrat gets done passes with Republican support. If you were to call and say to Eric Burleson, of all people, who passed the Second Amendment, it was his Second Amendment Preservation Act on the Senate side, but he is the one who took my VESA bill and helped me get it through his committee and onto a bill as an amendment. If somebody reached out to him and said, listen, I know you helped with this. It's going to mean a lot to this person or to me or to, I think if we can reach out to people when we don't need them to hear us on something else, then maybe when we come back and say, and now I'm working on this, and here's why I'm hopeful you'll consider an alternative. I mean, if you don't live in their district, it's hard because they're never going to have to answer to you unless they run statewide. And they're never going to count on you as a Democrat to support them, but it may just open the door enough for them to hear a message that you have to deliver. Mm-hmm. So building those relationships matters. And that's one of the things that is so amazing about this partnership among the Senate women this year, that 11 of us are working together on something. Just a fun fact in the 200-year history of the Missouri legislature, a total of 36 women have served as senators. Total of 36 women in 200-year history, where 34 people are elected to serve in the Senate and do that every year. So I think that's.
Well, it gives me an idea, because I'm thinking, at first I thought your Senate, when you talked about the women, were all Democrats. Are there some Republicans?
Oh, no. There are, I think, 5 Democrats and 6 Republicans.
You know what? It'd be nice to, I guess we just have to look up and count all the female ones. Are all the female ones in that group?
Every woman senator is part of this project.
Okay.
And
I think that what you just gave me was an idea. You know?
It's not public yet. We're working on it kind of together. I mean, I'm willing to tell people about it,
right?
But until we have something concrete to provide to you, I wouldn't talk about this yet.
When you get it together, if you can get it to me, or Brian, well, you know me, so you could easily send it to me. We'll get that into our newsletter. We'll announce it and just tell what it is, because I think if people hear from us, and I've got other groups, Planned Parenthood and other committees on women's voices and things. If you give me something that I can circulate what the plan is and suggestions of what we do to open doors, I think that's a really a valid and good thing to take some time.
Yeah, and I think that, we're all in the interim now. A lot of us are meeting for different things, and some of us are still meeting on Zoom. I know Tracy is for a lot of reasons, and I'm very busy, but we're trying to work on this and get this done. And as soon as we have something public to report, you bet we'll reach out.
Yes, that's great, because then we can get it out, put it on Facebook, all kinds of things. But we
Right.
need
and
to
we're going to want that help, because one of our plans is to travel around the state and to introduce what we're going to be doing. So
yes, and I think that that's going to help do some bridges with some Republican women and see what we can do. That's a great good. I'm glad. I'm really glad to hear that. So I'll just wait for a communication whenever it comes.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Do we have, I think Ellen had to leave on another call. So do we have any other questions from the audience who would like to raise their hand and say anything? Or Norm? You're muted, Norm. Whoop, you're still muted.
I know.
Oh, great. Thanks, Norm.
Thank you, Senator Shoup, for everything you've done and everything you continue to do. In anticipation of Republicans putting out attempts to restrict voting even more so, do Democrats have any intentions to put out bills to the contrary, in fact, that would expand voting? We actually do not have early voting. I don't know how many states do have it, but we don't. The only early voting we have is for people who have an excuse, like being out of the county or serving as an election judge or being too sick. We really don't have early voting. We did have it, and that was to end at the end of this past calendar year. So what's the story on that? Got any plans to counteract suppression with expanding at least early voting?
Yes, we will. We will have those bills, and thank you for correcting me. That's absolutely right. We don't have early voting, and we need to. Yes, there will be bills put out by the Democrats, but what happens is that generally they may be sent to a committee in the Senate. They don't have to be sent to a committee in the House, but they generally don't tend to get hearings. So what they're used for is models of what we would like to see. It doesn't mean they can't get a hearing, but they're models of what we would like to see so that we have some way to combat the opposite of what, the suppression bills. But yes, we always put out a message. For years, I filed Medicaid expansion bill, as did many, many other Democrats, because we didn't want to say, well, we don't have it because none of you Democrats ever filed it. We always filed it. We always made the statement that said, yes, this is something we care deeply about. I'm willing to file a bill and stand for it. So we will do that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else? I see Tracy McCreary has joined us, but I don't know if she's really still here because I don't see her. But if she is, she could say hello. But hi, Tracy. We're glad that you're running for Jill Shoup's seat. So is there anyone else that would like to say anything, or are we going to be wrapping up here a little bit early? Going once.
Tracy, are you here?
Yeah, she might have gotten called away.
Right, yes.
Because all you all are just so darn busy.
Right.
I think she might have too, because I messaged her too. So
okay. That's all right. So okay,
Representative McCreary. There she is.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, good.
Tracy, will you unmute?
One more time. Just we caught her surprise.
You unmute, Tracy?
It doesn't look like she's she is muted still.
Yeah. He's working on it.
I think she must be muted.
No, I'm not doing it.
There we go.
Not me.
There we go.
I didn't do it. There she goes.
Yep. I'm so glad to be able to be a part of this program tonight. Senator Shoup has been a great leader for all of us Democrats in the Missouri Senate. And I'm so thankful that she has used her voice to speak up for all of us. So thank you for having me as a part of this program.
Well, and I think I've said this earlier, but Tracy is just a champion for so many issues that we care about and has been, she's worked not only in the House, but behind the scenes in so many ways. And I feel like to get somebody with her knowledge and experience and willingness to be brave and strong and passionate about the issues, I feel like we're so lucky. And, as somebody who's going to be leaving the office, it's always good to have somebody that that's coming up behind you. And I could not have handpicked anybody. Actually, I think I handpicked Tracy years ago, but maybe she didn't know it. But there's just nobody better. So I don't know if any of you have questions for Tracy. She had a different experience than me because she was in the House. Not that we want to put you on the spot, Tracy.
Oh, I'm always glad for questions.
I think we're looking forward to a robust campaign and getting excited and things again. We've all been in a little bit of a lull here and Zoom meetings, and it'll be time to dust ourselves off coming up here soon and get enthusiastic about doing some real work to get you and other Democrats elected.
Well, and I will just comment, Maureen, when you mentioned the September in-person meeting, it is the day before veto session, if I'm not mistaken, in Jefferson City. So most of us go down early to meet with our caucus and stuff. So Tracy, I'm not speaking for you, but I'm guessing she's not going to be available to attend that meeting.
No.
But
we may try, we're going to try to see if we can do a combination for those who can't attend in person. So maybe, although you'll probably be doing dinners and things, but there'll be always the opportunity to pop in on a Zoom or something like that. So we'll be in touch. We won't be strangers. So, well, good. Well, thank you so much for all the things that you shared and the hopeful things too. And I think we'll sign off now and have a good summer, although you're working very hard.
Thank you all for inviting me tonight. It was such a pleasure to see your faces, and I hope to give a lot of you a hug soon in person.
Yes.
Take good care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.